So you've been looking at DAWs and wondering which one. Good question, because there's a lot of options out there in the marketplace. In this video, we'll be looking at platforms and price. Alright, so let's start with the freeware. This is a platform grid, and as you can see, Audacity runs on Windows, Mac, and Linux. Pro Tools First and Studio One run on Windows and Mac. Cakewalk runs on Windows, and GarageBand runs on a Mac. And just a note, Audacity, Cakewalk, and GarageBand are products unto themselves, whereas Pro Tools First and Studio One Prime are scaled down versions of their fully featured products. So basically they're giving you an opportunity to try before you buy. In this grid, we're looking at MIDI and plugin support. Now, a caveat on the plugin notations. I found that descriptions about VST and AU plugins were not always crystal clear. There's actually versions of VST plugins, like VST2 and VST3, and it wasn't always clear in feature descriptions if both versions were supported. Also, you'll find that some DAWs require a wrapper or an add-on to use VST and or AU plugins. And sometimes plugin support may not be available across all versions of a particular DAW. So there's a number of things to consider when looking into plugin support. The notes in the grid reflect the best info I was able to find. So here is the platform grid for the fee-based products. Now, in this grid, you'll notice I added a column for networking. There is something called a link feature developed by Ableton. Bitwig and Revisan make use of Ableton's link feature. And Cubase and Pro Tools offer a cloud collaboration feature. Needless to say, I found lots of opinion and discussion about networking. If you're interested, you can find more information on websites, forums, and on YouTube. Alright, so a lot of information on the MIDI and plugin grid for the fee-based products. This grid shows all of the various versions of each of the products I reviewed. There may be 2, 3, or even 4 versions of a single product. And for the cost, instead of showing each price point, I organized the cost into ranges. Now you may notice I labeled the cost column as initial investment. This is because as time goes on, your DAW will offer upgrades, maybe free, maybe not. And again, this was another topic for discussion in user forums, something you may want to look into before making a purchase. Alright, moving on, let's take a look at some of the versions. Avid offers 2 versions of Pro Tools in addition to their free version. You'll notice that Pro Tools Ultimate is the only DAW in the list with an annual subscription fee. There was no one-time purchase option to buy Ultimate. Presonus offers 2 versions of Studio One in addition to their free version, and there are 3 versions of Ableton Live. There are 4 purchase options for FL Studio, but the thing is, there are really only 2 versions of the product. There is the Fruity version and the producer version. Signature is the producer version with additional plugins, and All Plugins is also the producer version with even more plugins than Signature. Side note on FL Studio, this was the only product I reviewed that advertised free lifetime upgrades. Reaper markets one version of their product with 2 licensing options. If you're an individual user, you can get Reaper at a discounted licensing fee, and I've seen it priced for around $60. Now, the thing about Reaper licensing is that it only covers 2 versions of the product. So, for example, if you purchase a license for version 6, your license will cover version 6 and the eventual version 7. And when version 8 comes around, you'll need to buy another license. And this license would cover version 8 and the eventual version 9. So, as you can see, there's a number of different approaches being used to market DAWs. Now, I was in the market for a new DAW. My budget was between $200 and $500. I work on Windows and Macs, and using these grids and internet research, I narrowed my selection down to these 4 candidates. After doing additional research, here is where I landed. Reaper was a good fit for me, runs on Windows and Macs. I have found folks in the user forums to be very helpful. There is a really good set of tutorials on their website, and the single user license at $60 for 2 versions was well within my budget. Now, I participate in forums and Facebook groups, and very often someone will post, which DAW should I get? Which is understandable because there's a lot of products and features, out there in the marketplace. But the thing is, when it comes to selecting a DAW, it's not really a question someone else can answer. And that's because it just depends on a number of individual factors. For example, what is your level of interest? What is your skill level? What platform or platforms do you plan to run on? Are you recording your own music? Are you going to record other musicians? Are you doing a podcast? Are you doing voiceover work? So all of these factors play into selecting a DAW that's right for you. So be sure to check out the links below. You'll find a bunch of websites that I use for the information in this video. You'll also find a link to the tables. Feel free to download. And with that, give us a like, subscribe, or a comment, and we'll see you next time.